The rising sign is the way you present yourself to the world. If you are an introvert, you will have an introvert sign rising. If you are an extrovert, you'll have an extrovert sign rising. The extrovert signs are Aries, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Sagittarius, and Aquarius. The introvert signs are Taurus, Cancer, Virgo, Scorpio, Capricorn, and Pisces. Now you can check this out with your friends if you cast charts. Look at the rising sign and see if that person doesn't follow the rules. If you don't know if a person is an introvert or an extrovert, just ask him. He knows what he is. Because of this, if we can correctly determine if a person is an introvert or an extrovert, we can eliminate 6 signs that could not possibly be the rising sign. For the difference between an introvert and an extrovert, I have found one main dividing line. All other characteristics are a derivative of that one main thing. When a person says, "I'm a private person," or "I value my privacy," that person is screaming, "I'm an introvert." Introverts don't like to talk about themselves. Extroverts have no problem. Introverts believe it's not prudent to go around giving information about themselves. Who knows when it can be used against them? They will talk about themselves if they have to, but they usually prefer not to. Because of this, introverts have a limited scope of conversation. It is more difficult for them to keep a conversation going, and they come across more secretive. Therefore, people do not warm up as quickly to them as they do extroverts. You see, people like to know who this stranger is they're talking to. Since extroverts are so open about themselves, people have a good idea what they're dealing with. This gives people a greater sense of security, whereas introverts are looked upon with suspicion. Because extroverts are so willing to talk about themselves, they have a much wider swath of conversation to choose from. If they run out of things to say, they can always talk about themselves. Therefore, they talk more than the introverts. They tend to be more skilled in conversation, unintimidated in talking to people, and therefore much more sociable, which leads to being more outgoing. Introverts are not so forthcoming. Practiced at keeping information to themselves, they can be shy, self-conscious, intimidated, even tongue-tied in talking to people, and, of course, have a fear of running out of things to say. They can believe they're boring.
Show. I'm probably the biggest bore you've ever had on the show.
Really? You think?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll be the judge of that.
Oh.
Listen, I'll tell you.
Well, I don't really, they asked me, "Do you want to come on the Dick Cavett show?" And I said, I got nothing to talk about, really.
Yeah.
They said, "Well, think of something, anything." So I thought, okay, we'll go and talk about Raga, which is...
Film. You mean that's it? When we're done talking about that, then...
Then I go.
You don't like to talk, then?
Well, not really. Sometimes, if there's something to say, but there's really nothing to say these days.
I have that feeling, too. People think that I must love to talk and that I would love to go to parties and yak my head off, and I could go for months without talking.
Well, you talk every night, don't you?
I know, and I've never liked it. I mean, I don't crave conversation. I could sit in an empty room for days and days. I'd have to leave occasionally, but not to talk.
Picture a fraternity of guys sitting around the living room at their frat house. It's a raucous event with the extroverts throwing out one-line zingers, people laughing. The introverts sit passively, taking it all in, rarely participating. They're wallflowers. Is there anything good about being an introvert? Yes. They do not tend to be risk-takers. They are prudent with their private life. They don't talk to strangers. The extroverts are too friendly. They're more apt to throw out the welcome mat to a total stranger, so they don't know who they could be dealing with. The introverts are very introspective, and they take the time to think things out. There are probably more successful comedians who are introverts rather than extroverts, believe it or not. They take the time out to think of good material or wait until they're inspired by something funny rather than rely on the spontaneity of their personality. Introvert comedians: David Letterman, Taurus rising; Ellen DeGeneres, Pisces rising; Conan O'Brien, Virgo rising; Dennis Leary, Capricorn rising; Bill Burr, Cancer rising; Jerry Seinfeld, Taurus rising; Stephen Wright, Pisces rising; Jimmy Fallon, Pisces rising. For some of the extroverts, we have Jay Leno, Aquarius rising; Joan Rivers, Aries rising; Chris Rock, Aries rising. So how do we tell whether a person is an introvert or an extrovert? Body language. Watch celebrity interviews. Look at the way they sit. An extrovert will tend to sit up erect or lean forward. The back often does not touch the back of the chair. One hand is often resting on the lap, with the other on the armrest, or both hands are on the lap. He is alert, engaged in the conversation, animated, and ready to participate. They're unintimidated talking in front of an audience. With the host, conversation goes naturally, smoothly, with no fear of what there is to talk about. They are not always led by the interviewer's questions, sometimes coming up with a topic they want to talk about. They give good eye contact and elaborate fully on the question asked. Extroverts generally enjoy being interviewed. Introverts get a little too relaxed in the chair. Putting both hands on the armrests is almost a dead giveaway. Their backs often touch the back of the chair. They may give poor eye contact and may be self-conscious or nervous speaking in front of an audience. They are led by the host in conversation. They answer a question and wait for the next question. Now, regarding sitting in a chair, this technique doesn't work every time. There is nothing cast in stone on these rules. Sometimes a person is old or overweight and he can only sit in a chair one way. Sometimes there is only one way you can sit in a chair. Sometimes a person sits like an introvert, but he's actually an extrovert, and vice versa. Sometimes he switches back and forth from an extrovert to an introvert sitting position. So there's no hard science on this, but it can be a useful guideline. Another thing to consider is the gap. Look at the gap between the host and the guest. The closer the gap, the more outgoing the guest is. The further away the guest is from the host, the more shy and introverted. Another thing to note, when people do antics on talk shows, they are usually extroverts. Introverts are too shy. For example, Drew Barrymore flashes David Letterman. Drew has Gemini rising. Andy Kaufman baiting Jerry Lawler into a match. Andy had Leo rising. But when celebrities are performing, all bets are off. Then they're all extroverts. They all know what they're going to do next. It's all scripted. There's no spontaneity. You want to get them on the hot seat where they're forced to be spontaneous. Then they show their true colors. You should know when people describe a celebrity from their first-hand account or from second-hand accounts in unauthorized biographies. People are often describing the rising sign.
If I had to guess at your background, I would have thought maybe farm or Idaho, something like that. I don't know whether it's your physiognomy or what it is.
That's all I got. Next time we talk astrology. See you in the next video.